All right, so we are now recording, just so you know that. And so before we get started on the actual lecture part, I want to talk a little bit about transportation to the airport for those that need transportation. Some of you have your own transportation already taken care of, and so. But I want to thank Rich Sample and Pastor John Cook because Rich is going down with his truck, and so he's got room for himself and three others. So Rich and his brother Dave are going to be driving down in the truck along with Dominic and Richard. So that's taken care of there. And then in the Grace Baptist Church van, Pastor John and daughter Grace, Linda Pruitt, Callie King, myself, and Janice. And now I'm still not sure about Anna and Mitch. They said they might have their own transportation, but there's room for them if we need to. Otherwise, they may not. All those that have their own transportation, Laura and Greg, who are here tonight, so glad to have you with us, guys. And Ammon. Is it Ammon or Amon?
Amen.
Amon.
It almost sounds like amen, but yeah.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to have to get used to that pronunciation. So Amon, Frank and Yolanda have their own transportation. Debbie and Teresa have their own transportation. Kathy is going from Bangladesh. So let's see what we got going on here. There she is.
Hey,
Hi, Debbie.
I took the wrong exit.
Oh, well, that happens.
I get lost with people. I tell you.
Okay, who's trying to join? Okay. Let me stop presenting for a second. I think maybe I can. Okay, I'm waiting to be. Oh, here, admit. Okay, and there is Anna. I just mentioned Anna. I'm not.
We're not getting any of them on the screen this time. You know that.
Say again.
We're not getting to fix them on the screen.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Okay, that's all right. Okay, there's Anna. Hello, Anna. I don't know if you can you hear me? Can you?
She's muted right now.
Muted, yeah. Anna, if you can unmute, because I wanted to mention something to you. Specifically, if you can unmute your microphone and say howdy. There you are.
We're here. Sorry,
Yes, I'm here too.
we're still
Okay, great. So Anna and Mitch, I wanted to ask you if you were able to get the transportation to the airport or if you need transportation.
I
No.
believe we got her all sewn
no,
up.
we're all squared away.
Okay.
I'm very
Very
clear
good.
about this.
That was what I wanted to find out because we were just talking about transportation. And so here is where we are now. Let me come back to our screen. So for those that are on, that's not what you want. Okay, I'm gonna have to. Well, this is not right. This is not what I want. Okay, just a minute. I put a new monitor in here, and I think, yeah, this is the problem right here. I want to duplicate these. Okay. All right. Okay, I think now everybody's seeing what they need to see. Folks that are online, are you looking at my Israel tour airport transportation document?
No, not this minute. We're just seeing you and then Anna, Frank, and myself.
Okay, I need to come back here and share my screen again. All right, David, now can you see my Israel Airport transportation document?
Yes.
Okay, good. All right. So a few technical changes this afternoon in this classroom, so we're trying to get those all squared away. I think we're working just right now. So those that are going in the Grace Baptist Church van then are here, and Anna and Mitch have their transportation, so that's what I needed to find out. So glad to learn that. And so the plan is those that are going in the Grace Baptist Church van and in Rich's truck, we're going to meet here at Shasta Bible College at 6 a.m. 6 a.m. here at Shasta Bible College, because the parking lot here at the Bible College should be pretty secure for a place to leave your cars. Now, if you have somebody to drop you off, that's not going to concern you, but some people may need to drive here and leave their cars, and that'll be great. Okay, so that's where we are tonight, and I'm done with that, unless there are any questions. All right. And, people, of course, are wondering what's going on in the Middle East with Iran and all of that. The bottom line is nobody knows. Okay. I could talk a lot about it. I've been following the news very, very carefully. Iran is playing its old game of delay by use of talks, which is probably good for us. We've got lots of military force in the area that could strike Iran. From what I'm reading, I don't think it's going to happen right away, but it's anybody's guess. I mean, obviously, and for good reasons, the Pentagon isn't going to let their plans be known publicly. So anything could happen, but I think we're going to be okay. At least for now, we're just planning on going. And we're going to go and we're going to have a great tour. You probably will have family and or friends who are saying, "Are you sure you want to go?" Yes, these people nod their head. It's just it's not really any more tenuous now than it would be at any time. It's just the nature of the Middle East, and it's not any more tenuous than it would be if you were visiting any major city in the United States. Because things can happen anywhere at any time. So we're going to go and we're trusting God. I think things are going to be fine. But 2 weeks in advance is too soon to tell. And we'll know a lot more next week. And then another week from then, we'll know even more. So we're just, at this point, we're going. And I think we're going to have a great time. So, okay.
I do have a question.
Yeah.
We were talking about all the different possibilities. If
Yeah.
we got partway there
Yeah.
and then we got to Frankfurt and then they decided planes aren't going to come into Israel because bombs are flying.
Yeah.
Would they let us just change and get off in Frankfurt and spend 2 weeks in Europe? Or but they
We need a plan B.
Yeah.
The plan B, under those circumstances, plan B would catch the next flight back to the United States. Yeah, because the thing of it is, as a scheduled tour,
yeah,
the price you paid had to do with
the whole thing.
reserving hotels,
Oh, I know.
reserving the bus, paying the bus driver, the tour guide, all that. And they can't just automatically take and switch that suddenly to something in Frankfurt,
right.
Germany.
Right.
Yeah. Now, it could be, if you wanted to, well, I don't know. If you wanted to stay there and stay in Frankfurt, you might be able to talk to the tour company and say, can I catch a later flight back?
Yeah.
And they might say, yeah, we'll arrange that for you. And then you'd be on your own to,
Right. Oh, yeah.
um,
Well, we bought trip insurance, so we'll just use the trip insurance money and stay there for 2 weeks.
yeah.
There you
There you go. Yeah. And I think I might have shared with you, actually, the last time Janice and I were in Israel was in 2019, right when COVID was starting to break out.
It was 2020.
It was 2020, but it was right while COVID was breaking out, and our tour got cut short by half.
Oh.
So we were part way into the tour, And the Israeli tourism ministry contacted our tour guide, said, you gotta stop, and these people have to go home. But so things can happen. But we had a good half a tour, and actually the last few days of the tour were the best because they put us up we were in one of the swankiest hotels in Jerusalem.
Wow.
And we spent extra days there than we would have otherwise. And our tour guide, they wouldn't allow him to lead tours, but I led walking tours every day that we were there with our tour group, and we just went around, and there were no other tourists anywhere. So we made lemonade out of the lemons, and they had a wonderful time. And everybody remembers that tour very fondly, but there were places, of course, that we didn't get to go because of that. But we got in half a tour and saw a lot of great sights. We were actually up at Caesarea Philippi, and there was a news team there filming a news story, and this is before we got sent home. But still, there was hardly anybody there. And our tour guide went over to the news team and said, hey, I've got the last tour into Israel. You want to interview us? And they said, yeah. So we got on the Israeli news. Okay. Last time we talked about Gedi. But I didn't spend a lot of time talking about it, and I didn't show you any pictures of Gedi. So we were talking about the Dead Sea, and Gedi is along the shores of the Dead Sea, about halfway up the western shore of the Dead Sea. Down at the south end of the Dead Sea, you'll have Masada. Up at the north end, you'll have Qumran, side of the Dead Sea Scrolls. About halfway in between is Gedi. There actually have been some scrolls discovered right in the region of Gedi, but that's not what it's most well known for. But we'll visit Gedi also. You can see this canyon going up through here. And this is Gedi. There's a kibbutz down here at the bottom where you see this vegetation growing. But I like this picture because it gives you an idea of what the mountains of Judea are like. So here's the Dead Sea down that lowest point on the face of the earth, deep down in the Syrian-African rift. And look at how these cliffs jut up from the sea. And they go way, way up onto this plateau. As you go inland, further west from this plateau, you can see it start to rise. Way up at the top of the mountains, probably more like, I would say probably about here, 2/3 of the way over to the right, near the horizon there, it would be Jerusalem. Okay. But Gedi itself has a stream that runs down through this canyon and then eventually empties into the Dead Sea. And here are where those caves are, where David hid out from King Saul. We talked about that last week in the lecture, but this gives you a good visual picture of Gedi. Here is the waterfall, the first waterfall, beautiful waterfall, and we'll probably hike up to this waterfall and spend some time at this place. But look how beautiful that is. In the midst of all that desert, you can imagine why this was an attractive place both in ancient times and in modern times. Gedi means the goat kid. And it's the kid of the ibex goats that live in that area. And here's a couple of cute kids. And their moms and dads have these beautiful horns that circle back like this, which is what in ancient times most of them were used for the shofar horn. Today, the shofars mostly are made by a different goat that comes from Africa because they're a more magnificent horn. But the ibex have a very magnificent horn too. And these goats are just incredible mountain goats. You would not believe how they can climb up a sheer cliff with ease, no problem. And sometimes we see ibex goats when we're there, sometimes we don't. You can see by their coloration, they blend in perfectly with that those surrounding cliffs. And you can be looking right at one and not see it. But if it moves, then maybe you can kind of catch it. Sometimes when we're at Gedi, they're right there kind of grazing on the grounds, on the grass, and you can get up quite close to them at times. So there are times when I've gone and not seen a single one. There are times when I've been there and I've seen quite a few of them. So we'll see if we see any this time. So up on the top, I have never been to this site, but you have to go well past that first waterfall to a second waterfall, and I think there's a third one. And then you get up kind of more on the plateau. But there is a Chalcolithic era temple. So Chalcolithic, we're talking about Copper Age. Chalcos means copper, so prior to the Bronze Age even. And this would have been some kind of a pagan worship center, probably. There's not a lot left of it, but it is there. It dates back to probably before the time of Abraham. Now, we talked about the Dead Sea also. I like this picture because it shows you the depth of the base of the sea. So at the north end, you can see how deep it is. Very, very deep. And then down at the south end where you have the evaporation ponds, it's very shallow. This peninsula here is what I talked about last week. This is the Lashon. Lashon means tongue in Hebrew. And you can see it's shaped a little bit like a tongue. So the Dead Sea has dried up enough to where this peninsula now extends all the way across and divides the Dead Sea into two separate bodies of water. There's a little channel that connects the two of them that they have to keep open. But that's how it's kind of changed. But you got the Arnon River here, which is a major water source for the Dead Sea coming in from the Jordanian side. The Jordan River itself on the north end coming in. Of course, at En Gedi, you have some water flowing in from there. But there's no outlet. Down at the southern end, you're still the Syrian African Rift Valley, but this is the low point. So from here, it goes upwards and eventually meets the Red Sea. But there's some hills in between that keeps the Red Sea from flowing down into this. So here's some of the salt encrusted on these rocks. I kind of like that picture. There's another one showing the salt encrusted surface of the water and one of the shallow parts. These are these evaporation ponds. So they have them all separated, and then they can mine minerals, various minerals. Salt, a lot of salt, but potash. I forget the others, but there are a number of minerals that are mined out of the Dead Seas. For a long time, that was one of the major natural resources for Israel, and helped to fund really the young country in its early days after 1948. They have many more things going on for them now, especially these natural gas finds that they have out in the Mediterranean. And that's just a remarkable thing. And this is the mineral-rich mud. They actually, companies package this and sell it as a beauty aid, but you can go right down there and just scoop it up off the bottom of the Dead Sea and smear it all over you. It come out with beautiful skin. Or so they say. This is floating on the Dead Sea because of that 25% mineral content. You can't sink. Okay, so we're going to come up to the north end of the Dead Sea and talk about Qumran. Did I mention Qumran in the lecture last time? Okay, so let me go there to the notes. Here's Qumran. So everybody's heard about the Dead Sea Scrolls, of course. That's one of the most famous things that have ever come out of Israel. And they were discovered at this place called Qumran. It's at the north end of the Dead Sea, on the west side of the Dead Sea. And at this point, you're just to the south of the city of Jericho. Jericho lies just to the north of the Dead Sea. Oh, that reminds me. Before I do this, for our two students who are taking this for credit, I need to go over the review questions for tonight. Okay. We haven't passed anything yet. So here's what to pay attention for. You should be able to locate on a map Jericho, and I just told you it's just north of the Dead Sea, okay, on the west side of the Jordan River. Jericho. Lachish. We'll talk about Lachish tonight. See if you can locate that on a map. Ashkelon, we will talk about, and we'll talk about Beersheba, or most English speakers say Beersheba, but it's Beersheba. So Beersheba is down in the south in the Negev. So we'll locate it for you a little bit later, but it's way far south, way far south. Okay, now Jericho marked the border between which two tribes? We're going to spend a little bit of time talking about Jericho tonight. Number 3, what New Testament event is reputed to have taken place at, this is pronounced Karantal, unless you're Arabic, in which case it's Kurantul. And there are some other names for it, but Karantal we'll talk about. What Old Testament hero won a great victory in the valley of Elah? And here's Lachish. When was Lachish first settled? Lachish has such a very interesting history. 6, who was the Assyrian king who laid siege to Lachish and captured it? Number 7, what people lived in Ashkelon in the Old Testament? 8, what famous individual from the early New Testament era was born at Ashkelon? So you can see the whole thing. So somebody, famous individual in the early New Testament era that was born in Ashkelon. Number 9, which Jewish patriarch is, or patriarchs are, associated with Beersheba? Debbie, did you find Beersheba?
I found we were
Lachish.
looking for Lachish.
Oh, you're looking for Lachish, south of
That's it.
Jerusalem, up in the Judean mountains, south of Jerusalem.
Right.
Did you find it there?
Well, the map says tell.
Yeah, tell it is a tell.
Okay.
You'll see that. Yeah, there isn't any city there today.
Okay.
Okay. And then 10, of what region is Beersheba now the capital? So those are the things you want to watch for tonight. Of course, we'll have lots of other things as well. Let's come back here. Qumran. So this isn't on your list of review questions, but it's such an interesting site because everybody's heard about the Dead Sea Scrolls. And in 1948, in fact, a young Arab shepherd boy down in that region was looking for a lost sheep, and he couldn't find it. And so he thought maybe it had gotten lost. Maybe it was, climbing up the hills. Maybe it had gone into one of these caves. So he picked up a rock and he threw it into one of these caves, see if he could find his sheep. And he heard the sound of pottery breaking. And he went in to investigate, and he had broken a piece of pottery, and there was paper. There were papers inside. And so he brought those papers home to his dad. His dad thought that was interesting. He took it to an antiquities dealer in Bethlehem. And the antiquities dealer ended up with it and held on to it for a while. Eventually, it showed up in an ad in a newspaper in New York. And that's how it became public. And this was the first of the Dead Sea Scrolls. And in time, many, many more scrolls were discovered, came to light. And these all date to about 200 to 300 BC during the intertestamental era, some of the oldest documents ever discovered. And the climate down there by the Dead Sea is just perfect for preserving something for a long period of time. So these scrolls were written on, some on papyrus, some on animal skin. And normally these things just would not have lasted that long. They would have rotted away. But in that very, very arid, dry climate, they were preserved for all this time. And so we have today thousands of documents that have come from the Dead Sea Scrolls. Many of them are biblical texts, but they aren't all biblical texts. Quite a few of them were texts describing the rules of this society that lived at Qumran, known as the Essenes. At least that's the most commonly thought theory. There are a couple of other theories about who lived at Qumran, but most scholars believe they were an Essene communal group. What you're looking at here is not the caves, but this is where the communal group lived, and this is what they believe is the scriptorium, because here they discovered also ink wells and writing benches. So these scrolls that were discovered in the caves back behind here, many of them may have been produced right here. Some of them we think also maybe came from other locations and were brought there for safekeeping when the Romans were coming to put down the rebellion in Israel. But this is a very interesting room where these ink wells were found and writing benches, and so it's called the scriptorium, where they think the scrolls were copied. Here's one of the ink wells that was discovered. So this is really old. This is over 2,000 years old, but it's in perfectly good shape. And you can imagine having like a quill pen and dipping it in your ink and writing in Hebrew these words on probably animal skin, maybe on papyrus. Here's evidence of earthquake damage. This used to be a complete staircase going down into a mikveh. The mikveh is we would call it like a baptismal tank. Okay, so baptism was not invented by the Christians. Baptisms were practiced by Jewish folks. There were a number of different reasons why they would immerse themselves ritually. It was for purification. And so all through Israel, you'll see lots of, plural is mikvaot. You'll see lots of mikvaot. But mikveh, they generally have a staircase going down and a separate staircase exiting. So you go down unclean, you come out clean. And a mikveh in Jewish law must have what's called living water. Living water is flowing water. And so how do you have that in a place like this where there's no flowing water? So a mikveh would usually have just off to the side of it a little reservoir to hold water, and that water could trickle in and then flow out. So as long as there was even just a little bit of water flowing in and out, you have living water. John the Baptist, of course, used the Jordan River. So a flowing river is living water. One of the best known mikvaot today, I believe we talked about last time, is the pool of Siloam, or Shiloach. Shiloach means sending in Hebrew. So the pool of Siloam is the pool of sending because the water from the Gihon spring was sent to this pool. But it was a massive mikvah where all these pilgrims that came for the annual pilgrim festivals could immerse themselves before going up to the temple to offer their sacrifices.
You took that other walkway is the one that was just reopened or just open. No, the one.
Yeah, the one. Yeah,
that takes you up to the top.
yeah. And my projector's giving me problems. I'm not sure why, but we're just gonna have to live with that. Okay. But that's right. That one that just opened up is the one that goes up to the southern steps of the Temple Mount. Okay. Now here you are looking at a system of cisterns. So you're you're right by the Dead Sea. You can't drink the water out of the Dead Sea. But if you have a communal group, you have to have water. And these mikvaot have to have water. Where are you going to get your water? So you saw, for example, the picture of Gedi with these canyons going up into the Judean mountains. So it hardly ever rains down by the Dead Sea. We were there once when it did rain, but it's very unusual. but it rains up in the Judean mountains, and the water flows down through these canyons, massive flash floods. In fact, every year there are people who get stuck in these flash floods, and people even lose their lives at times because people are adventurous and go where they shouldn't be going. They're not paying attention to the weather forecasts. But these flash floods can be very, very dangerous. They come down, and oftentimes they will wash out the main road going along the Dead Sea, and then they have to come and repair it afterwards. Well, the Essenes there at Qumran would collect this water into these cisterns. And so when it did rain, they channeled all this water very carefully, collected it, and kept it so they had a constant water supply. And here are some of those, over 2,000 years old. And all these were originally, they were plastered on the inside. The plaster's gone now, but the plaster on the inside would seal them so that they could keep the water. Now, the caves themselves, this is the most famous of the Dead Sea caves. This is cave number 4, and you can see it here. And you wonder, how in the world did anybody get there? Today, they use climbing equipment like modern mountaineers would have. But in ancient times, we're not real sure how they managed to either climb or descend to these caves. And this isn't the worst of them. There are some really, really scary looking caves in the middle of very, very steep cliffs. But this is cave number 4. Over 40,000 fragments were discovered in this cave. Now, when we say fragments, some of those fragments are only this big, okay, size of a quarter maybe, or even smaller. Others were much larger. So the largest scroll discovered is the Isaiah scroll. It has the entire book of Isaiah intact. But oftentimes you just have small fragments, large.
Is there any chance there was water through there at that time?
Water flowing through there?
Yeah.
Not through the cave, but down here at the base, you can see where water flows. And this is what's called a wadi. It's an intermittent stream. And so again, when it rains, higher up in the Judean mountains, it flows down, and water will be flowing right through this valley right here. But up in the cave, it would be dry all the time. That's part of the reason those scrolls survived. They never got wet.
I just wondered if they had a water level up to a point where.
Not that we know of, but biblically, in the time of Abraham, Abraham and Lot had a disagreement among their shepherds. And so Abraham said, listen, we've got to split up. And he said to Lot, you take whatever part you want, and I'll take the rest of it. And Abraham, it says that Lot lifted up his eyes and he looked at the well-watered plain down by the Dead Sea. So in Abraham's day, it was a well-watered plain. There were different kinds of, climactic conditions in those days. But things changed a lot after the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. And when the fire and brimstone rained down, that seems to have been the time when this was, really became a bad place. Rich?
Has the Dead Sea always been considered dead, or was it at one time active?
Yeah, at one time it was better. So in Lot's day, apparently it was not as salty. Had a fleeting thought. No, it's gone from me. But in the millennial times, it's going to be fresh water, because it's water that comes out of Jerusalem, out of the temple, flows down into the Dead Sea. And Ezekiel talks about this water making the waters of the Dead Sea living again. So if the millennium restores a former condition, we could postulate that at some time the Dead Sea was a freshwater body of water. In the millennium, it'll have fish in it. They'll fish there. By the way, interesting thing, just in recent years, I should say, down by the Dead Sea, there have opened up a lot of these sinkholes because there's so much salt in the ground. When the fresh water does flow down these wadis, it now dissolves that salt that's down in the ground, and it causes the collapse of the surface level ground. And so it creates these sinkholes. And then in very, very rainy periods up in the mountains of Judea, these have actually filled up with fresh water. And in some cases, fish have washed down from the Judean mountains and have been seen swimming around in these sinkholes with fresh water, and right next to the Dead Sea. And of course, there are all kinds of people that think this is some kind of a miraculous sign, the coming of the Lord. But that's, I mean, you can explain how that happens, and it may have happened at other times in the past. But there are increasing numbers of these sinkholes down by the Dead Sea these days. And it's even caused a collapse of some of the roads in the area that they have to then come and reroute the roads or do something to try to fix that. Okay, this is cave number 4, and we'll be able to see this, probably this exact same view when we're at Qumran. It's just right there, very easy to see. Okay, let's talk a little bit about Jericho. And before I show the pictures, I want to go to the notes. Let's see. Was there anything about Qumran? Qumran, located at the northwest corner of the Dead Sea. It might be the city of salt that's mentioned in Joshua 15:62. That's pure speculation. But there was a city. It was not Jericho. There may have been a settlement there in Joshua's day. But we just don't know. But in the 1st century, it was a major site for the Essene community. They first arrived in the 2nd century BC. 31 BC, it was destroyed by an earthquake, and we saw one picture of an earthquake that had destroyed those steps. It's a very earthquake-prone area because you have 2 major tectonic plates that are coming together right in that region. 4 BC to AD 6, Qumran was rebuilt during the reign of Herod Archelaus. In AD 68, the Essene community was destroyed by the Romans. This is, in 70, the temple in Jerusalem was destroyed. So they're starting to converge on Jerusalem. They're making their moves, and they destroyed this Jewish settlement as they're moving in. The encampment of a Roman garrison was there during the Bar Kokhba revolt. We've talked about Bar Kokhba before. Does anybody remember what period of time he lived and who he was? This is 2nd century now, AD, or around 130 to 135. And he led the second revolt against Rome. And the Romans put down his revolt. But for a while, there was a Roman garrison here at Qumran. And they made a camp there as a place where they staged their operations from. Dead Sea Scrolls discovered in the cliffs above Qumran. Current archaeological excavations are searching for underground caves above the Qumran settlement. And the modern day archaeologists are using ground penetrating radars to try to locate these cavities that are down below the ground. And so there's a lot of work being done in that way. Okay, so that's that. And we're just about to move into Jericho. Now, where is Jericho? Jericho is located about 9 miles northwest of the mouth of the Jordan at the Dead Sea. Get all that. There we go. And it's located now about 825 feet below sea level. The Tell, Old Testament Jericho, is located about 1.25 miles northwest of the modern city. So you've got the Old Testament Jericho, and there's a tell there that's been excavated, and most likely we'll go up onto that tell and be able to have a very close look at the excavations there. Then there is a modern city of Jericho. We may drive through that and see it. Now, hold on, because that's not all there is to Jericho, but there is the tell. The New Testament Jericho is represented by another tell slightly to the south of Old Testament Jericho. So there actually, today, there are 3 Jerichos. There's the modern city, there's the Old Testament city, and there's the New Testament city. which explains what is something of an enigma in the scriptures, because one of the Gospels talks about Jesus healing a man as he's entering into Jericho. In another Gospel, the parallel account says he's exiting Jericho. But it's not a problem at all when you understand that there were two Jerichos at that time. Okay, so as he was exiting Old Testament Jericho and about to enter New Testament Jericho, or vice versa, there was this beggar who was wanted to be healed. Now today, of course, we've got the third Jericho, which is the modern city. So it was known in. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Which Jericho is on the place?
Yeah, well, all you need to know is that it's 10 miles northwest of the mouth of the Jordan at the Dead Sea. That's good enough. Now, in the Old Testament times, it was known as the city of palm trees. And by the way, it's one of the oldest cities in the world, Jericho. Very few cities are older than Jericho. But then that's assuming a continuity between modern Jericho, New Testament Jericho, and Old Testament Jericho. But Old Testament Jericho was destroyed. It was destroyed never to be built again. And that was according to a prophecy. But the city of the palm trees, and here are the references to that: Deuteronomy 34:3, Judges 1:16 and 3:13, and 2 Chronicles 28:15 uses that name. Now, when Joshua sent 2 spies to spy out the land, they came to the city of Jericho. And pretty much everybody knows that account. So they were hidden by Rahab the harlot, and she gave them help in exchange for a promise that her own family would not be destroyed when the Israelites came in. And they spared her and her family. And when the walls of Jericho fell down, her house didn't fall down. Her house was in the wall of the city. It was built into this wall. And so, God had to do a miracle to save her house. And he did. So the fall of Jericho is described in Joshua 6, referred to in Hebrews 11. The king of Jericho was killed by Joshua at the initial invasion of Canaan. Joshua 10, verses 1, 28, and 30, and we have a reference to that in Joshua 12, verse 9 also. Now the city of Jericho was cursed by Joshua, and it was said that when it fell, it would never be rebuilt again. And we find the fulfillment of Joshua's curse carried out in 1 Kings 16:34. And the city of Jericho marked the border between Ephraim to the north and Benjamin to the south. So oftentimes Ephraim becomes like a title for the entire northern kingdom, because it was the main city of the northern kingdom of Israel. And then Judah, the main tribe in the south. Some would say the only tribe, but there's a curious thing when you look at the tribal allotments. Does anybody know where the tribal allotment for Simeon was? Yeah, this is the strange thing. Simeon was given an allotment in the south, surrounded by Judah. And so Simeon was part of the south, but they weren't able to do much, and they were just eventually kind of assimilated by Judah. So some of the Simeonites wandered north and settled there. Other Simeonites remained in the south. So when you see references to the 10 tribes of the northern kingdom, it's not exactly 10. It's 9 plus some remnants of Simeon, and some remnants of Simeon were in the south. But so it's not quite as neat and tight a division as some think. Anyway, but at Jericho, you have the north is Ephraim, south is Judah. Yeah, David's ambassadors were sent to the east, and they were humiliated because they thought they were spies, and they had their beards cut off and their trousers cut off, and they stayed at Jericho until their beards grew back before they could go back up to Jerusalem, so they wouldn't be humiliated when they came back to the capital city. And that's where they stayed. They stayed at Jericho. That's recorded in 2 Samuel 10, 1 Chronicles 19. So, hooray for beards. It's one of the locations of the schools of the prophets. So, Elisha was conducted a school of the prophets. Now, Elijah and Elisha were major prophets, but they were not writing prophets. They didn't leave a book of the Bible, but they trained prophets. And from this school of the prophets came other prophets who later, in successive generations, were the writing prophets we have in our Old Testaments. So we have this Second Kings chapter 2 reference to the school of the prophets there at Jericho. And Elisha healed the bitter waters at Jericho. There is a main well at Jericho today, they say, is the well they used that was the one that was healed by Joshua, and it may well be. Rebuilt after the return from Babylon, according to Ezra and Nehemiah, both make reference to that. During the Hellenistic period, this is the first Hellenistic period, the intertestamental period, Alexander the Great, that Hellenistic period, the city began to spread beyond the Tell and became famous for dates and balsam. So remember, it's referred to as the city of palms. And as you probably know, dates come from a palm tree. Well, lots and lots of date palm trees all through the land of Israel.
What is balsam?
Balsam is a tree resin that is used to make like incense.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
The wood from the tree must be.
Yeah. So New Testament Jericho was built by Herod the Great. We talked about Herod being this great builder. And one of the things he built was the New Testament city of Jericho. The healing of Bartimaeus occurred at Jericho. Story of Zacchaeus. And every Sunday school kid knows about Zacchaeus. Was a wee little man.
Yeah.
But that account is there in Luke chapter 19.
That was in Jericho?
That was at Jericho. Yep. And when you go to Jericho, you can see the actual tree that Zacchaeus climbed up.
Yeah.
And they'll
You
even,
can buy a little
yeah.
piece of bark from it too.
Yeah, well, they'll sell you a postcard with a picture of it. Okay. Jericho fell to the Romans in the year 70 in a fierce battle in which the Jews tried to destroy the valuable balsam trees. And in the Byzantine period, now again, remember, this is Christian Rome. After Constantine the Great, it becomes the Byzantine. So we're talking about 4th century and on. There were several churches and monasteries built in Jericho. Yes?
Was that built in the New Testament Jericho or the modern day Jericho?
Well, I don't know.
Oh,
That's a good question. I would say probably the New Testament Jericho, but because I think the modern day Jericho is more recent than that. Okay, let's take a look at some pictures of Jericho. Here's an aerial view of the Tell here
Oh, wow.
and the modern city next to it.
How high is that town?
Well, you can walk up it. You can walk up to the top of it. So, I don't know, a couple hundred feet.
Wow.
Okay, so that's the New Testament.
This one here is Old Testament
Old
Jericho.
Testament.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think, yeah, I think this is Old Testament Jericho right here. I think these red roof buildings, if I'm not mistaken, are the water source, the spring that was supposedly healed by Elisha. Yeah, the Old Testament, Tell of the Old Testament city of Jericho right there. after Jerusalem, the most excavated site in Israel. Yeah, here's the famous tree that they'll tell you was the one that Zacchaeus climbed up in. This is a sycamore tree. A sycamore tree is a kind of fig tree that is native to the land of Israel, but it's growing in modern Jericho. So it really can't be. But it is a pretty old sycamore tree, no doubt. So yeah, you can't now. There's a fence around it. When this was taken, you could climb it. Okay, so looking west from Old Testament Jericho, you are looking again at the rising Judean mountains. Okay, and so just like we had further to the south by the Dead Sea, you've got these sharp cliffs here. This mountain is the mountain of temptation. Traditionally, this is the site where Jesus was driven into the wilderness to be tempted of the devil. So it goes by the name Karantal, which is related to the word for temptation, coming from, well, I was going to say it came from Arabic, and it might. The Arabic is Kuruntul, with 3 U's in it, Karantal. So up here in the side of this mountain, it's very difficult to see on this picture, but let me draw a circle around it. There is actually a Greek Orthodox monastery. And today there are, I think, 3 monks living there. In the past, there have been many more, but it's very difficult to get to this monastery. But you can imagine looking at it right up in the middle of that cliff. A lot of the monks from ancient times liked these isolated, desolate places because they could give themselves to contemplation and meditation without being bothered. And so there are a number of these up this canyon here that will take you up in the direction of Jerusalem. And as you come down the road from Jerusalem to Jericho, you can actually take a little detour and see this canyon further up. And there's some other monasteries up in this canyon, in fact, kind of like this, built in the sides of the cliffs. But this one is a Greek Orthodox. But the site here is held to be the traditional site of the temptation of Jesus. So you can imagine hermits wanting to go to that very place and try to experience what Jesus experienced and try to relate to the account that we have in the Bible. Now, if you go up into that site, and this tower right here is part of that Greek Orthodox monastery. So just from above it, looking down, you can see Jericho down here in the valley below. This is the modern city of Jericho, and I suppose somewhere in there you might be able to see the tell, but I can't quite make it out from here. But this is just gives you an idea of this canyon, this steep canyon, what the terrain is like up in that part of the world. Okay, any questions about Jericho or Karantel? Yes, Sam.
On Google Earth, it points out a place there. It says it was where Jesus was baptized on the Jericho River, right outside of Jericho.
Yeah, yeah. That's traditionally that is held to be the site of the baptism of Jesus. Now, in the Gospel of John, it identifies the location of where John the Baptist was baptizing as a place called Aeneas. And we think we know where that is, and that's close to that place. Today, they're trying to develop that into a baptismal site that tourists can go to. In the past, there's been so little water there, and the water is really polluted and bad news that it's just not very good. Now they're trying to improve the situations there, and they've been improving it over just the last few years. And I'll be interested to see if we get a chance to see it what it looks like now.
So do you think that really is where John the Baptist was baptizing people, right outside Jericho?
Probably close by.
Was he in a scene? John the Baptist, was he?
Well, that's a theory that some people have. I don't think he was, but some people think that he may have visited the Essene community. Some people even speculate that Jesus had been part of the Essene community, just because in the writings of the Essenes, you find some things that are similar to some of the sayings of Jesus.
Okay.
But the fact that John the Baptist ate locusts and wild honey is the kind of a practice that some of the Essenes might have practiced. So there are a lot of these loose connections that people say, oh, well, you know, they're trying to put 2 and 2 together and come up with 5.
Okay.
Yeah, but that is one theory that many scholars have.
Google Earth also says there's a baptismal souvenir shop.
Yeah, okay, no doubt. No doubt.
You'll probably buy some of the water.
Here is Carantal. Now, yeah, here it is. The word Carantal comes from the Latin word for 40, the 40. So the 40 days of fasting.
Wow.
So it's the
So
Mount.
it's not related to the word temptation?
No, it's not. I had that wrong. There's another. Well, one of the names is coming in number 3. Okay, it's the traditional site of the temptation. Number 3. A fortress was built on the location by the Hasmoneans. Now remember, the Hasmoneans were intertestamental period of time. They were the priest kings over Israel for a period of time until they were put out of the job by Herod the Great. And the fortress was named Dok or Dagon. Josephus refers to it as Dagon, maybe like the god of the Philistines, Dagon, who fell down on his face before the ark. Anyway, that's a connection that Josephus makes. Byzantine monks founded a monastery. We saw that monastery up on the side of the hill at the Carantal of the former Hasmonean fortress. The present monastery was built in 1887 and is inhabited by, at the time I wrote this, it was 6, but there are 3 there right now, 6 Greek Orthodox monks. Okay, now I want to move to the next site. We're way different now. If you go back up to Jerusalem, if you're looking at a map, and go south and down towards the Shephelah, south of Jerusalem, you might see a biblical city, Bet Shemesh. And we are close to Bet Shemesh here when we're looking at the Elah Valley. So generally identified with the modern Wadi Esant. Remember, Wadi is one of those intermittent streams. Wadi Esant, also known as the Valley of the Acacia. This is 11 miles southwest of Jerusalem. It's a valley that was used by the Philistines to gain access to the central hill country. Again, the Philistines had their Pentapolis down by the Mediterranean. That was where they had their cities. But if they wanted to, say, invade the Jewish cities, they would come up through this valley of Elah, because it was an opening up into the Judean mountains. This was the scene of David's victory over Goliath. Okay, Valley of Elah. So that's the famous victory that was won there. So the Bible talks about the Philistines over on one side and the Israelites camped over on the other side. So that's where you have this valley in between. And then Goliath, of course, coming out and challenging the armies of Israel, and everybody in Israel cowering till young David shows up and he says, well, I'll take care of this guy. And he does with a sling and a stone. There is an interesting mention of after that victory, the Israelites gaining a big successful battle and then coming back to a place called Sha'araim, Sha'araim, Sha'araim. Now, the reason this is significant is because there's been a fairly recent archaeological discovery up at the high end of the valley of Elah. So a couple of archaeologists were engaged in a new dig. They knew there was a city there. They're trying to figure out what was going on. And a couple of interesting discoveries. One discovery is one of the most ancient Hebrew inscriptions that we have to date, written on a tablet. It appears to have been like a schoolboy's exercise writing the Hebrew alphabet. And it was discovered in a wall of this city. But there were also, this city, unusual to cities of that day, had 2 gates. Now, of course, Jerusalem is a big place, and it's got lots of gates. But most cities had 1 gate, because that's easier to protect. This city had 2 gates. Now, come back and think about the name Sha'araim. So, I don't know, Dominic, do you know the word Sha'ar?
Off the top of my head, but it's got the plural ending on it.
Yeah, it's got that dual ending on it, actually. Ayin. So Sha'ar means a gate. And Sha'araim, the name of the city, is the 2 gates.
Huh.
So up until this time, nobody knew exactly where Sha'araim was, but now they're pretty sure they found it. That's been an exciting discovery. We probably won't go to the archaeological site of Sha'araim. It's a little bit off the beaten path, but we'll be lower down in the valley where the battle took place between David and Goliath, and you could look up in the direction of the archaeology there. On the west side of the valley, near Sokko, there is a very large and ancient tree of this kind known as the terebinth of Wadi Sur. It's 55 feet in height. Its trunk is 17 feet in circumference, and the breadth of its shade no less than 75 feet. Now, this is what I've written here is based on research. I haven't seen this tree, so I'm not sure exactly where it is, but this is what they say. And it marks the upper end of the Elah Valley and forms a noted object, being one of the largest terebinths in Israel. So terebinth is one of the trees that's common there. There's terebinth is an evergreen tree with needles, like a pine tree.
17 feet, huge.
Yeah, it really is. And at the east end of the valley is the site of Adullam. You read about Adullam when David was hiding from Saul. So Adullam, and I've got a picture of a cave in Adullam, which is probably like one of the caves where David might have hid. We'll go ahead and take a look at some pictures of Elah. This is looking at the view from the hilltop of Azekah, looking down on the valley. So it's a pretty broad valley. Here would be one side, I think, where the Philistines were, and the Israelites on this other side. And the battle taking place down here in the bottom.
Where is this in relationship to Bethlehem?
So this would be south of Bethlehem, south and west. So Bethlehem is still up at the top of the Judean mountains, basically. And you go south, and then if you go down towards the Mediterranean, you're going to go down into the Shephelah. And this is in the Shephelah. And it's quite close to Bet Shemesh. Bet Shemesh, if you know your Bibles, was the place where the Ark of the Covenant came after it was released by the Philistines. Where the Philistines captured it, and it caused all kinds of trouble for the Philistines. And they loaded it on a new cart and hitched it up to a heifer that was not trained, and let her go. And she went and took it back to the Israelites, and it stayed there at Bet Shemesh for a while. That wasn't very far from the valley of Elah here. So here is a terebinth tree. Now this is not a tamarisk. This is the terebinth. And the terebinth is like an oak tree. Tamarisk is the one with the needles. I may have gotten that wrong. I get terebinth and tamarisk switched around my brain sometimes. But this is the terebinth tree, the oak tree. Here's a stream flowing down through the valley of Elah. Where did David pick up his stones? Okay, so there's lots of stones down there, and I've got several of them that I've picked up and brought home with me.
you choose 5 smooth ones?
One of them had a G on
G for Goliath.
Do they sell slingshots and souvenirs?
They do,
They
actually.
Like,
They do.
yeah, they would like that.
The little Arab boys make these slings and sell
I bet.
them. Here's one of these caves at Adullam in the valley of Elah. So, of course, this has been built up with stones in front, but back inside here, there's a cave. So Dave had hid out from Saul in one of these caves. Okay, any questions about the valley of Elah?
So that's terraced agriculture or something?
Yes, around here, that's agriculture. Yep. And this is, you can see this tell, you've got these sloping sides, flat top. So we are going to be talking about the city of Lachish. So Lachish, it's a 31-acre tell. This is also located in the Sheva, about 25 miles south and west from Jerusalem. Surrounded on 3 sides by Nahal Lachish. Nahal is the Hebrew word for a stream or river, Nahal. So this is Lachish River, okay? And it flows around it on 3 sides. You can see actually here, well, you can't actually see the stream, but around 3 sides of it, you have it, and it's kind of triangular shape. So it'd be an obvious place to have a city, ready access to water.
And nobody has, it doesn't look like they've excavated.
They have excavated. You can see, let's see. Right up in here, you can see some excavations. You can see some excavations down here on the side. You can see some walls here that have been exposed. And there's another cut in the tell right here. So there has been excavation there. Archaeological excavation is here's a deep cut right here, trench excavation. Excavation is slow going.
Is all that land for those tells owned by the National Historical Society or whatever their equivalent is?
Some are owned by other either organizations or what have you. So it varies from one site to the next, because you don't know always, even if it is a tell. Though usually it's obvious, but Israel didn't just go in and buy up all the tells. So Lachish was conquered by Joshua in Joshua chapter 10. It was excavated by the archaeologist Starkey in 1932 to 1938. That's the first excavation that was done. And in the 30s, there was a lot of, especially British archaeology, some French archaeology going on in the land of Israel. That was when the age of archaeology was really starting to blossom during this period of time. It was excavated by Aharoni, an Israeli archaeologist from 66 to 68, and by Usishkin, 73 to 87. So these are the 3 major periods of excavation that took place there. And I don't know of anything that has been done since 1987, but that doesn't mean it hasn't happened. Now, you can see how old this is. It was first settled, we think, about 3000 BC. 3000, that's before the time of Abraham. So sometime between the flood and Abraham, somebody settled here. From 1500 BC, it was an unfortified Canaanite city. Now, by unfortified, what that means is it didn't have a wall around it. Okay? Fortified cities had walls around it. It was destroyed in 1200 BC. Rebuilt again as an Amorite city under the control of Egypt. So the Amorites were one of those ancient Philistine or Canaanite tribes that was warring against Israel. And my apologies for that screen going in and out, but it's back on again. Okay, Joshua conquered this city, the Amorite city, in Joshua 10. Eventually, it was destroyed perhaps by the Israelites in 1130 BC. So that's just a little bit before the time of David. David about 1000 BC. In the 9th century BC, there was a new walled city built there, probably by King Rehoboam. So Rehoboam was Solomon's son, and he was the one that was responsible for splitting Israel into north and south. But he built this up as a walled city. He fortified the city, and he wanted especially to be able to defend his kingdom against the Israelites to the north.
Mm-hmm.
So Rehoboam did a lot of arming and building up of defenses of southern kingdom. Okay, Rehoboam. Okay, 9th century. We have the reference that in 2 Chronicles 11. With regards to this new walled city, built perhaps by Rehoboam, several points. King Amaziah took refuge in this city and was killed there when fleeing from rebels in Jerusalem, 2 Kings 14. The early 8th century BC, the city was damaged by an earthquake, according to Amos and Zechariah, and then rebuilt again. Now, here's probably the most well-known fact about Lachish. 701 BC, when Hezekiah is king in the southern kingdom, Sennacherib, the Assyrian, laid siege to the city and he captured it. That's recorded in 2 Kings 18. We also have extra biblical confirmation of this in the Assyrian records. The siege was depicted on a relief sculpture in Sennacherib's palace, now on display in the British Museum. And eventually the Assyrians completely destroyed the city, leveling it to the ground. The city was rebuilt on a much smaller scale by the Judeans after it was destroyed. And in 586, it was destroyed again, this time by the Babylonians. So the Assyrians, then the Babylonians, then the Persians, then the Greeks, and then the Romans. That's your succession of kind of empires that are ravaging this area. But the Assyrians destroyed it, and then the Babylonians did in 586. Okay, we come then to the post-exilic era after the Jews returned from Babylonian captivity. And what's going on? Well, as they return, they're settling ancient Jewish cities, and one of them they resettled was Lachish. And Nehemiah 11, verse 30, talks about the rebuilding of Lachish during this period of time. During the Persian and Hellenistic periods, walls were built around the city to defend it. And then later the site was abandoned and just kind of fell into disuse. And like happens with a lot of old cities, things crumbled, earthquakes, weather, erosion, dust storms fills in, and you end up with this tell. Okay, so that's Lachish. There is quite a bit to see there in terms of the archaeology, and you can't see much from that aerial picture that we looked at. There's a lot to see there. We're not scheduled to visit Lachish, but we'll see lots of archaeological sites, and after you've seen a few of them, you go to another one, you've got a pile of rocks on the ground, and you've got somebody telling you what they mean. But it's interesting to have the history of it. It was a very important city there. Very old city, 3000 BC. Rich?
Was Lachish on the trade route, or was the trade route further to the coast?
Yeah, so there was not the major trade route, but within Israel itself, there was kind of a major route that ran north to south along the Judean mountains. A little rough going for a major trade route. The major trade route ran down by the Mediterranean, and there was another one that ran down the Syrian-African Rift Valley. But up on the top of the mountains, if you wanted to travel north and south, there was a road that went by Lachish. Okay, Ashkelon. Let's see. Let me see if there are any other pictures of Lachish. Here's Lachish. Here is at Lachish, the foundation of the governor's residence that stood shortly before destruction by the Babylonians. That was the second big destruction of it. And the largest Iron Age structure known in Israel is right here at Lachish. That's a very large foundation or big palace. Okay, now we're going to talk about Ashkelon. For this, we're going to go down to the Mediterranean coast. Down Ashkelon was one of the cities of the Philistines in biblical times. Today, Ashkelon is not in the Gaza Strip, north of the Gaza Strip. And we may visit Ashkelon. And that was a good time to. Now things have quieted down in the Gaza Strip. Ashkelon's a beautiful, beautiful place to visit. Located on the southern Mediterranean coast between Jaffa and Gaza. So in the 19th to the 15th centuries, it was known in Egyptian texts. This would be BC, of course, 19th to 15th centuries. In the 12th century BC, it became a Philistine city. So you've got, see, Ashdod, Ashkelon, Gath, Gaza, and Ekron. Those are the 5 Philistine cities, 2 A's, 2 G's, and then an E. The 12th century became a Philistine city. Samson here killed 30 men to repay his part of the vow of the riddle, according to Judges 14:19. 598 BC, it was destroyed by Babylon. That's recorded both in Jeremiah and Zephaniah. Now, in the Hellenistic period, intertestamental era, Greeks are in control. It became an important seaport, and they built a water break out into the sea so you could bring ships in and moor them safely. This is something the Greeks did. Number 7, and this is one of the review questions for the quiz. It was the birthplace of Herod the Great. This is interesting because Herod is known as an Idumean. An Idumean is a corruption of the name Edomite. Edom lies on the east side of the Jordan River, but there were Edomites residing in Ashkelon. And this is where Herod the Idumean was actually born. So Herod was born, not over on the other side of the Jordan, but on Israel's side of the Jordan. And Herod, Herod's such a fascinating biography to study. He had this fascination with Judaism, and he wanted very much to be liked by the Jews, but they never did like him. And he of course was a terrible tyrant. He was a great builder. He built great building projects. He did many of these, trying to win over the Jews. But remember, he had kicked the Hasmoneans off their throne and had usurped kingship over Israel. And he had himself named by Rome as, quote, King of the Jews. That's what he called himself, King of the Jews. But he fell in love with a Jewish girl, Mariamne, and married her. And but things did not go well for Mariamne. She met her death at Herod's anger. Herod was suspicious of everybody around him, his wives, his children, his counselors. He was a very paranoid person.
So,
What?
well, like Saul.
Yeah. Like Saul, but even worse. Yeah. That's right. That's a good comparison to make. Now, in the Byzantine period, okay, so now we're after the New Testament era, we're into Byzantine Rome. Jews were the only minority group who were allowed freedom to practice their religion at Ashkelon. So under the Byzantines, this was Roman rule, and under the Byzantines, everybody's supposed to be a Christian. So the Byzantines were not always really kind to the Jews. But there were exceptions here and there, and Ashkelon was one place where the Jews were allowed freedom of religion. There were also pockets up in Galilee where, under the Byzantine rule, we know that the Jews were allowed a great deal of freedom. But that wasn't generally true throughout the Byzantine Empire. In 1153, the Crusaders built a strong stone wall at Ashkelon during the Kingdom of Jerusalem. In 1270, it was destroyed by Arabs and then abandoned until modern times. 1948, when the modern state of Israel was reborn, they rebuilt the city, and it's a beautiful city today, really. A very lovely park, interesting archaeological discoveries. Here is the beach at Ashkelon. Very nice beach. Here is
Guess you didn't see me.
your question. Go ahead.
Oh, I just wondered before you moved on, could you to the next city or whatever? Could you say a little bit slower those cities that were the Philistine?
Yeah,
Gaza
I will. Okay.
and whatever.
Yeah, thank you for that question. The 5 cities, it's known as the Pentapolis. Penta means 5, polis means city. Pentapolis means 5 cities. And they were Gaza, Gaza, Gath, that's where Goliath was from, Gath, Gath. Third, Ashkelon, which we have right here, so I don't have to spell that for you. Fourth would be Ashdod, Ashdod, Ashdod. And then the 5th one is Ekron, Ekron, Ekron. Those are the 5 cities.
What is that? The Penta what?
Pentapolis, Pentolis. So we have words in English like metropolis. It has that polis ending in it. It's also the same root in words like politics, policy, polity. These all come from the root word, Greek word polis, which means a city. And penta is 5. So Pentapolis, Pentapolis, 5 cities. Okay.
Great, thank you.
You are welcome. Sue.
Was Lachish a tell at the time of Christ?
Was Lachish a tell at the time of Christ? I don't know. I suppose it probably was, but
Because it was conquered before him.
yeah, it was conquered before him. So
Right.
it was laying there in ruins, and it probably was.
There were probably people just like living around the ruins or in the ruins.
Perhaps. Yeah. Yeah. I'm trying to think whether, see, Eusebius in the 4th century wrote a book about places all around that biblical land. And I can't remember if he describes Lachish in that or not. But that's a good source of information, ancient information about biblical sites. I'm trying to think of the name of the book. But you could look it up, Wikipedia or something. Eusebius, and find what he wrote. But he,
Eusebius?
yeah, Eusebius. He was the bishop of Caesarea. He was also a key player at the Council of Nicaea. He, in the contest, I guess, between the Arians and those who were supporting the deity of Christ, Eusebius tried to moderate position between them. But anyway, that's beside the point. But he wrote this book. I'll probably think of it 30 minutes after class is dismissed tonight. It's a common name that's used to describe books that describe geographical locations.
Okay.
And he has one anyway. But I again, I don't know that he described Lachish. but he does describe a lot of ancient places. Now back to Ashkelon. Here in the red circle, you can see this gate. Now, not much beyond that gate has been excavated, but this gate has been, and this is a Middle Bronze period Canaanite gate. So we're going back, roughly around the time of Abraham, say. And so we have a city at Ashkelon, and this is the gate leading to it. If you dug back in here, you'd probably find lots more stuff from this Canaanite dwelling. Constructed of mud bricks. Outside the gate, a bronze calf was discovered, apparently once worshipped at the city gate entrance. And this was typical of these ancient city gates. You usually had cultic centers where the local gods were worshipped. Okay, that's about all there is to Ashkelon. This is a good time to take a break. We've been going for an hour and a half, and when we come back in 10 minutes, we're going to talk about the city of Beersheba. A good place to take a break because we're going down to a totally different area of Israel this time. We're ready for a 10-minute break.
It's because that's the way the Americans pronounce it.
Yeah, Beersheba.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's pronounced Beersheba.
Are we going to Beersheba?
Yes.
But we're not going to Hebron.
Well, that remains to be seen. Hebron is, when I've had a Jewish tour guide, we couldn't go to Hebron because of the West Bank situation, tour guides. But there are Jews living in Hebron, and there's a Jewish half of the Cave of the Patriarchs. And
Watched a movie on it last night. We've been on YouTube.
yeah.
Almost every night watching movies about Israel.
Yeah, so the one year that we had a Christian guide, he took us into Hebron. And I was there years ago before all this West Bank stuff came about in the 1980s. And it's a very interesting place. But you have to be careful. There's a lot of tensions in Hebron.
And that building is beautiful, but it was built by Herod the Great.
Yeah.
And it's old.
It is very old.
Yeah, and it's never been, because it's been revered by both the Jews and the Muslims. It's been protected because that's where Abraham and Isaac and Sarah, they're all buried there.
They're all buried there. It was the first piece of real estate that Abraham purchased.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So George, if you could live in one spot in Israel, have a house there, live there, shop there, where would it be?
It would be by the Sea of Galilee.
By the Sea of Galilee. It's just really nice there.
Oh, it's beautiful. Beautiful, it's peaceful. The weather's nice. And there's such a variety of different landscapes. But it's it's not desert-like at all. Yeah. And Jesus had so much of his ministry there. It's wonderful in that respect too. But it's so hard to pick one place. But no doubt, the Sea of Galilee is just precious, very precious. To be more centrally located, like around Jerusalem, would be cool. But Jerusalem's it's a big, busy city, and everything's expensive. Jerusalem. We stayed. The last time we went, one of the places we stayed was a kibbutz in Galilee that had their own dairy, and they had the most wonderful cheese that they made right there, and so they had this. They had their animals, their cows, gardens, agriculture.
That's a weird, yeah, you got where you stand on the edge of something.
Do you know what emmer meat is? Emmer meat? The first, the oldest kind of wheat that was ever domesticated and made was from emmer wheat. It comes from that very region. And right outside of the same fields I was telling you about is a stand of emmer wheat that they've protected because yeah.
There's a acorn, E-I-K-O-R.
Yeah, acorn.
That is really supposed to be healthy.
Yeah.
A lot healthier for you.
Yeah, yeah, and emmer is like acorn.
Never take out.
Interesting.
Mhm.
We've worked hard over hundreds of years to make our bread soft and fluffy.
I know. Yeah, soft,
Now they're
fluffy,
realizing it wasn't very good for
but
us.
not very healthy.
No.
Well, it is the current. Yeah, nobody ever. But I got some
Yeah.
Okay.
Our dam
Yeah,
was
okay.
every
You're better.
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But since then it's been fine.
Yeah,
We've got there, so.
Yeah, I thought.
We're thinking.
I just think of what would require most.
Yeah.
Good work with Brian Owen. No, no, so I switch on my.
Oh, I love that little person. Oh, good. I'm glad. And in my closet, it's good. And it's, yeah. You know, a few things like chopsticks, you know.
Yeah, so I think everything you have there is
Yes,
good in there.
yeah.
So good.
And so I
And it
just.
also goes real good over there, like I read back here. But all I said, I think it's so
Yeah.
Just real good.
Well, thank you.
You are quite welcome.
Forever young.
But that's really
He's very
good.
good.
Yeah.
So Jesse and James and the kids are San Fe at a wedding. Jake's brother's daughter. And I was invited, but I just couldn't swing it too with everything else.
Very interesting.
Great, Blake's brother. Oh, okay.
Yeah, my big brother,
Yeah.
yeah, her cousin. So then I got to show you all the pictures.
When he was really hard.
So this is all the cousins.
Oh, fun.
So there's Jesse and James. Yeah, that's the church I think they got married, and that's Ed. He's just a little bit older than Jeff. And then that's one of his kids, and this is one of his kids. They're funny.
I like that.
And we've got a pattern celebrate. It was a black tie Western.
Oh, sure. I can do
So that's
that.
a little bit better picture.
Food.
Yeah. And then that's Ollie and Buddy. That's Barney Brown. That's Jesse and Buddy. That's cute. That's their oldest daughter.
Yeah.
She's an actress. Yeah, very well. Her name's Catherine Shell. And there's all the second cousins.
Yeah.
Jesse, that's a nice one. That's a vintage Spanish style. Everything she's doing involves that belt, everything else, she's got Goodwill and Salvation Army. And that coat that she wears, I saw the white leather coat she got. Perfect shape. I think it had one little like mark or something on it. She could get it off. But I think it was like somewhere we didn't even notice. So yeah, anyway, I thought, so the wedding was today.
Wow. Oh my goodness.
Yeah. Monday. They went yesterday. Well, Jesse and the girls left Wednesday. So they didn't go to the flight to Virginia to go. Right off
Oh, no. It's like, okay.
Yeah.
So, but you did say you could take
Yes,
those,
yeah,
and you're scratching.
So we think we make it.
Well, 5 days to get home.
Well, yeah, that was kind of rough. That was kind of rough back and forth. On the way soft plane. Thinking we're getting on, getting on the plane, getting buckled in, and then like telling you, we have to get on, but it showed up late. No, it was plane. We had to take off extra fuel. So they
Yeah, I was really surprised.
all stand by. And sit off, so, and they did actually have to sit off.
It's mostly Catholic church.
What, 700
So,
would make any difference on something that size?
I don't know, they sit off. Yeah, they're trying to move the luggage around.
Yep, yep. Yeah, I was on one where they had to, 5 of us first class.
Oh, it was a smaller
plane.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and it's
Kind of
like.
like when you're in the boat, you have to like move people around. Yeah. Have to do that.
And that is what there was 5 of us. So that was, well, that was probably 7. I mean, that seems like such a tiny drop in the bucket, you know.
3 years ago.
But
I don't know, maybe the.
it's hard to imagine that it could matter.
I don't think it's gonna be very cold. It's really there in December.
700 pounds would be a drop in fuel. I mean, that's such a tiny.
Really?
So,
We were getting especially with that
yeah, because when they, normally we're talking, you know, 9,000-10,000 pounds.
Oh, wow, I had no idea.
Yeah.
But it does go by.
So much like here, that's what.
Did you see it? Oh, no, you wouldn't have. Larry posted Eric's flies here.
It's right here.
Was it that, it's that video you sent us that was the Tasmanian, not the Tasmanian devil, the
So
rooster?
something in the front.
Yeah, there was a rooster, and I was like, is that a tattoo?
Yeah,
Did he
yeah.
draw that? I didn't see the little arrow.
Yeah, I didn't either.
That it was a video. I was like, all right, I don't get that picture. I don't get it.
I didn't either. I asked him.
You start to understand all your stuff.
Yeah.
Julian, you have to wonder. You have to like read between the lines and go, what is he saying? Is it worth asking? Sure. Just let it go.
I was up at Eric and Larry, and I don't remember what the deal was, but I needed to talk to her. Probably when I get ready to go down.
Did you call her?
Well, Eric says, just call her. Oh, did I said, oh, yeah.
And,
I have never talked to anybody that's been so awkward on the phone as her.
Yep.
Never, ever.
But you can stand in front of her and have a conversation.
Actually, what, I don't know.
The Hebrew study, the Thursday, the women's study is so many of these places.
Oh, really?
Yeah, yeah, and then we're doing it, you know, I'm happy that brain is trying to keep them separate.
I was doing that in August, ancient ruins on the 2 weeks, and then going to Athens in the ancient ruins there. What?
The Athens, the big stuff, and I don't, it's probably not quite this way, but I all the pictures of like one building.
Yes, I think so, yeah.
Yeah, and the like column.
Yeah, there's a lot of colors, yeah.
Since I got hurt
so the thing about this guy who moves me
I got a picture those things.
Like,
yeah.
yes, fake underwear. That has pads in.
So it's like, okay. He just struck up a conversation with me because he was curious about the group, so I just happened to be next to him. So he wanted to know about the group. So that's pretty special. So, yeah, because
Yeah, you need the extra support right there.
my experience.
Is that the hernia or the?
If you don't know.
It's a, yeah, that's.
It's the same thing.
Yeah.
It's
It's the thing that happened.
No.
So at the time they had.
Yes.
Yeah.
When the first guy was looking at it, and I had a big one, this guy, he said, "I want 300."
Oh my gosh.
Okay, folks, it's time for us to get going. In fact, we're a little past time, so we took a little extended break, but that's good. Everybody's enjoying each other's company. That's part of the advantage of having these classes. We get to know each other a little bit before we actually go on tour. So I'm glad that everybody's been enjoying themselves. But we want to come now, and we're going to drop way down towards the south of Israel, down at the very edge of the Negev desert. So to the south of Beersheba is desert. You find this expression occurring several times in the Old Testament, from Dan to Beersheba. And Dan is the furthest north. Beersheba is not the southern boundary of Israel, but it's the southernmost habitable part of Israel. That's why it says from Dan to Beersheba. You find that in the book of Judges, I think. And so we're down at the very south end of habitable Israel. To the south, you have, there are Bedouins who go around through the Negev with their flocks and so forth, and their camels. But as far as a settlement, Beersheba is at the southern end, the southernmost settlement in biblical times. The name Beersheba comes from the word be'er, which means a well or a spring, be'er. And Sheva means an oath. This is the well of the oath. And there is a very ancient well at Beersheba that we will no doubt see. And also very, very ancient water system that's quite fascinating at Beersheba. So Beersheba is located about 50 miles southwest of Jerusalem, roughly halfway between the Mediterranean and the Dead Sea. So about east to west, halfway between those bodies of water, and you're going south of Jerusalem about 50 miles. Think, well, 50 miles shouldn't take very long to get there, but it's not a straight road. It's 50 miles in a straight line. So it takes a little while to get down to Beersheba from Jerusalem. But we shall make our way and see some interesting things between. It is situated about 900 feet above sea level at a point where there are 4 wadis that come together. So this is why, of course, you have a dwelling place here. Now, these wadis, of course, are not filled with water constantly all year long. But when it rains, they fill up with water. And like we saw at Qumran, you can build holding tanks for that water and collect it. But there is a nice water system available. Oh, okay, well, that's all right. I'm just talking right now anyway. No pictures, but we'll turn the screen on. Thank you, honey. The 4 wadis that come together here are called the Besor, the Gerar, the Hebron. Now, you have another city called Hebron further to the north, or Hebron, or Hebron, as it's sometimes pronounced. Correct pronunciation for that would be Hebron. And then the Beersheba River. Again, these are intermittent water courses. Yeah, there we have it. Now, there's evidence of settlement here way back in the Copper Age, the Chalcolithic period. So it's an ancient place. The biblical significance of it. This city is the site of Abraham's well. It's mentioned in Genesis 21. So Abraham the patriarch is associated with this city. He also lived at Beersheba for quite a long period of time. This is possibly the site of Isaac's birth. Now, it's not specifically mentioned, but if you read the context, it seems that they were at Beersheba when Isaac was born. Genesis 21, verses 1 through 5. Hagar and Ishmael went out into the wilderness from Beersheba. And you remember they got out a little ways and thought they were going to die because it's just desert. You go south from Beersheba. There's nothing there, but God took pity on them and sustained them. Now, Beersheba is also the site of Isaac's well. So, Abraham's son is Isaac. Abraham had a well there. Isaac had a different well there. And Isaac built an altar there. You can read about that in Genesis 26 and Genesis 32. And then Beersheba was the home of Jacob, the third patriarch. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Those three are known as the patriarchs of Israel. Jacob, of course, is renamed Israel, and his 12 sons become the fathers of the 12 tribes of Israel. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So all three of the patriarchs are associated with this city. That's a big part of its importance. One of the reasons that I arrange the itinerary that we'll be following the way I do is I like to start down in the south with the desert experience. This is where the patriarchs started from. It's also how the Israelites entered the land of Israel under Joshua. So a lot of tourists will start out up in the north, or maybe along the coast, or maybe around Jerusalem. But I think to get us ready for the rest of it, it's good to start out with the desert experience. And this is the experience of the patriarchs. This is where they lived. So point F, initially it was given to the tribe of Judah, Joshua 15. And then later it was given to Simeon. Remember I talked about the tribe of Simeon in the south, surrounded by Judah. So this became the tribal allotment for Simeon, but Simeon couldn't hold on to it. And Simeon just kind of dispersed, got swallowed up by Judah. The judge Samuel had two sons that served as judges at Beersheba. If you're familiar with the Old Testament account of Samuel's sons, they were worthless. They were not good at all. They were very unjust judges. You can read about them in 1 Samuel 8. Beersheba is frequently mentioned as the southern extent of inhabited Israel in the expression from Dan to Beersheba. Look at these references many times in the Old Testament.
So where is Dan?
Yeah, Dan is up at the north end at there's actually a city there named Dan. It's just over to the west of Caesarea Philippi.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
On the map it says Tel Dan.
Tel Dan, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Tel Dan.
Okay. Ooh, that
And
is the
Dan
same.
during the divided kingdom became one of the two centers of cultic worship, where they raised a golden calf.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. Now, Beersheba, there is a modern town. It's not situated right at the town. It's located several miles away. But it's quite a modern town. There's a university there. There's a lot of industry there, with apartment complexes and so on and so forth. The modern town was built in 1900 as a Turkish army regional headquarters initially, by the Jews at Bet Eshel. In Israel's War for Independence, 1947, 1948, Beersheba was initially captured by Egypt. And again, this is the modern town, but later it was recaptured by the Israelis. Today, it is the capital of the Negev. So the Negev is an administrative district. We would call it like a county. Okay, so you have a whole district called the Negev, and Beersheba is its capital, with a population of only 120,000, which isn't a huge place, but it's a fair-sized city. Every Thursday, it hosts the weekly Bedouin market and camel auction. I've always hoped that our itinerary would take us through there on Thursday, but I haven't managed that yet. I'd like to see that camel auction. Okay, let's take a look at Beersheba. So here's the Tell aerial view of it, and you can see it's, there's a lot of excavation. You can see some definite houses and buildings and so forth. Here's a typical Israeli house of this era. It's a 4-room house. The front has a room, and a couple of rooms here with pillars to support the roof in the middle, and then a room in the back. You read about horned altars in the Old Testament. Here is a horned altar, and this altar was discovered at Beersheba. Now, it had been dismantled, and its stones had been used to build walls. So that's called secondary usage. But those pieces were taken out and reassembled, and so you have an idea of what a horned altar. This has 4 horns. And those horns could be used to maybe help tie down a sacrificial animal. Okay, that's it for that one. And we may actually finish up a little bit early tonight, which is not a problem. But I'll just take you through a few other slides that I've got and talk about them briefly. Here's a nice picture showing the geographical layout. So you've got the coastal plain down here at sea level, the Shephelah here. Now, somebody asked about Lachish. Here's Lachish. We were just talking about that tonight. So notice if you want to locate things, it's good to see things in relationship to Jerusalem. By the way, on this map, north is at the top right-hand corner. This is north. South is at the bottom left-hand corner.
And the Great Sea is?
Okay, the Great Sea is the Mediterranean. Yeah. The Dead Sea, of course, is the Dead Sea, also called the Salt Sea. And this little body of water here is the Sea of Galilee. So north of the Sea of Galilee, this body of water sometimes shows up in Bible maps as Lake Chula. It was never a lake. It was always a swamp. And the Israelis dried it up by planting lots of eucalyptus trees and by diverting the water into ponds, holding ponds that are being used as fish farms today. So it used to breed a lot of malaria. But this is the Syrian African Rift Valley. You can see how it's just this deep trench all below sea level. So coastal plain, the rising portion where you have Lachish here is the Shephelah. It's rising up into the mountains of Judea. Okay, here's Jerusalem. Jerusalem, if you go to the north end of the Dead Sea, go straight west to the Mediterranean, you will just encounter Jerusalem. And also, if you draw a line from north to south, right through the middle of the country of Israel, where the north and south line intersects with this line from the Dead Sea to the Mediterranean, where they cross is Jerusalem. It's right in the middle, right in the center of Israel. Israel is at the center of the world. You've got these 3 continents all coming together. Jerusalem is at the center of Israel. The Temple Mount is at the center of Jerusalem. And the center of the Temple Mount is the temple and the holy place of God, the Holy of Holies. So you get this zeroing in. So let's take a look at some of the, yes. Gracie.
Just out of curiosity, so is Gilead in this sense, is it kind of like one of those counties?
Okay, so Gilead over here is this high plain on the east side of the Jordan River that kind of overlooks it. It's a demarcated region between these 2 rivers. And North of that, you have Bashan. All of this is what's known as the Golan Heights. Okay. But in biblical times, you have Ammon, Gilead, and Bashan, and they were dominated by different kings in biblical times. Yeah, good question. So if you go up, yeah, Rich, and then Laura.
I was going to say that topographical map, it appears that there's kind of a valley between the Mediterranean and the valley that goes from the Galilee to the Dead Sea. There's no real big, north of that,
Jezreel Valley. Keep going, right there, yeah.
This one here, yeah, this is Jezreel Valley. So this is the Valley of Armageddon.
Is that where like weather patterns come through there because there's no big mountains between there like there is all the rest of it?
So this part right here is Mount Carmel. And Mount Carmel is heavily forested and also with a lot of chaparral brush. This is the valley that also in ancient times was kind of swampy. But today is farmed heavily. And then you've got these hills of Galilee. But yeah, the storms that hit Israel come in from this direction. They come and spread down through here. But your specific question was, but how the geography relates.
All over there, whether that was a slot where weather comes through.
Yeah, it's not. I don't know that it really funnels down through there so much. It comes in off of the Mediterranean from the northwest and just kind of hits that whole coastal line and kind of moves across. But it's wetter from the Jezreel Valley north, not as wet to the south, but this whole western part is wetter than further to the east, like up here in the hills. They kind of make four quadrants, like this. And the wettest part would be the northwest, the southwest probably next wettest, the northeast the next, and the south east the least, the most arid.
It's kind of like California.
Yeah, very much like California. Now, I will say one thing with regards to the weather. No, two things with regards to the weather. One of the things Israel did when they founded the modern state was they began planting lots of trees. Through the Middle Ages, most of the forests had been done away. All the battles that had been fought, armies cut down trees to make siege works and so forth. But in biblical times, there were forests. So the Israelis planted lots of trees, and they found out after they planted all these trees that it increased their rainfall. So they've really gotten behind this and gone whole hog after planting trees. Now, one of the things the Palestinians have done is they've set a lot of forest fires, and so the Israelis have had a time trying to keep up with their forests. There are some beautiful, beautiful forests. When they moved into Israel in 1948, shortly after they moved in, they hired agricultural specialists from the United States to tell them what's the best way to produce agricultural products from this land. And the agricultural experts said, forget it. This land is so poor, you'll never grow anything here. But the Jews planted lots of trees. Trees spread their roots through the land. The roots broke up the soil, and the leaves that fall from the trees enriched the soil, and they've been able to build up the soil, and Israel has become the breadbasket of the Middle East through their rich farming. They also have developed, of course, a lot of agricultural techniques. Drip irrigation was invented by the Israelis. And because that was, there's so little water, they discovered that you could just drip right down by the plant's roots, and you don't have to do flood irrigation or sprinklers that evaporate a lot of the water. You just put the water where it's needed. And they developed how you can put nutrients into the water too, and carefully regulate what kind of nutrients the plants are getting. They've done marvelous things with drip irrigation. So they planted trees. The other thing they did is Israel has really only been the only place where seeding of clouds has been successful. But they've been able to seed clouds and increase rainfall. So some of you may know who Larry Vardaman is. He was a meteorologist that worked for ICR for many years. He's retired now, but he used to be in charge of seed clouding for here in Northern California. And he said they worked at it and worked at it and worked at it, and really they got maybe just a tiny bit of an increase of rainfall, but hardly worth mentioning. But for some reason, the Israelis were able to make it work, and they've been able to get a lot more rain out of the clouds through cloud seeding.
Wasn't it prophesied that Israel would end up growing?
Yes. So Isaiah talks about the desert blossoming like a rose.
Mm-hmm.
And now that's actually a prophecy of the millennial kingdom that will come about after the second coming of Christ. But you'll find many Israelis today will cite that verse, and they think that they are fulfilling that prophecy today. Well, they have done marvelous things with the agriculture, no doubt about that. But not like what the Lord is going to do when He returns. Yeah, Laura.
So where's Ashkelon?
Okay, Ashkelon. Okay, here's Gaza right here. Ashkelon's north of Gaza, so right up in here. This whole region down here was where the Pentapolis was. So Gaza was one of the cities of the Philistines. Gath was a little further inland from Gaza. Ashkelon and Ashdod both along the coast. Yeah. It's a good question. Thanks for asking that. As we move up the coast, here's Joppa, which is today it's known as Jaffa. Yeah. So the letter P and the letter F in Hebrew are the same letter. Okay. The only difference is if it has a dot in the middle of the letter, it's pronounced like a P. If it doesn't have that little dot in the middle of the letter, it's pronounced like an F. So Jaffa. And Jaffa is just next door to Tel Aviv. Tel Aviv we talked about, that's that modern city. There was no Tel Aviv in biblical times, except for the Tel Aviv that was in Babylon, but not in Israel.
That's where we're landing.
Yeah. The Ben Gurion International Airport is just outside of Tel Aviv.
And that's the airport we're landing.
So when we come in, let's see, what time do we land? Who remembers? Okay,
Yeah,
so we won't be able to
11:50,
see.
Yeah.
We'll see the lights of the city. When you come in during the day, you're coming in over the Mediterranean and you see the coastline. You come in, and that's a beautiful sight. But yeah, we're getting there too late at night. It'll be dark. But and we're gonna land here, and then we're gonna drive down here to the south end of the Dead Sea for our first night at the hotel. So it'll be a little bit of a drive. There's a couple of ways we can go. I'm not sure which way we'll be going. There's a route that goes south and then cuts across. There's another way that comes up over the mountains and then down over this way, down to Jericho and then down. So and it's 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. It kind of depends on, I think, what traffic is like and what road conditions are like, and they'll pick one of those routes. As we go up from Jaffa, here's Caesarea. Okay, that's Caesarea by the sea. And Caesarea by the sea is that city that was built by Herod the Great, and he built a harbor out there. And they brought water down from Mount Carmel, built this great aqueduct that comes down here to Caesarea. Well, it doesn't look very far on this map, but it's quite a ways to bring water. Here's the Bay of Haifa. So the Mount Carmel sticks out like this into the sea, creates this bay, Bay of Haifa. Haifa on one side, Akko on the other side. Now, you go much north from Akko and you get up into Lebanon. So the next city up here, it's a biblical city, is Tyre, Tyre. That today is in Lebanon, so we can't go there. But interesting story about Tyre, you'll notice there is a little peninsula sticking out into the Mediterranean here. So in Old Testament times, this was not a peninsula. It was an island, and the city of Tyre was inland. But the inhabitants of the city built a fortress on that island in case their city was ever threatened by an enemy. They could go out to this defensible fortress on this island. So anybody that tried to take over the island had to get there by boat, and they could get up on the city walls and shoot arrows at the invading armies, and they were well protected. Well, Ezekiel talks about Tyre, and he talks about the walls of Tyre being cast into the sea and becoming a place for the spreading of nets. And it turns out that in the intertestamental period, exactly what happened was Alexander the Great, when he came through this area, went to conquer the city of Tyre. And so the people did just like they had always planned. They went out to their little island fortress and said, ha ha, here we are, you can't touch us. And Alexander the Great thought about that. He thought about it, and he said, oh, I know how I can do it. He took the stones from the city walls of Tyre and built a ramp out to the island. And so they could go over by land and ended up conquering the place. And so now there's this peninsula, and it's a wonderful place to go fishing. And the fishermen, spread their nets out there, just as Ezekiel said would happen. It's one of the really remarkable prophecies in the Bible. Anyway, we're not going there. Here's Nazareth. Now notice, Nazareth is on one side of this Jezreel Valley that we were talking about. At the base of Mount Carmel, it's a mountain range actually, and right where this pass goes through here, there's a little hill, and this is Megiddo. So from Nazareth, you can look across the Jezreel Valley at Megiddo, and from Megiddo, you could look across at Nazareth. And there's some other very interesting towns in here, Nob and Endor. Remember the story about the witch of Endor? Okay, Saul tried to bring up Samuel from the dead. That witch, she was up in this area at Endor. You can see Endor from Nazareth. You can see this. I think right here is Mount Tabor or Tabor. Mount Tabor is called it looks like a pregnant woman's belly. Okay. And but Mount Tabor is there, and that's associated with the battle that was fought between Sisera and the armies under the judge Deborah. And so you had Barak, who was supposed to lead the armies. He said, "I won't go, Deborah, unless you go with me." That was that whole battle, and that's where you have the Sisera was killed by.
So you have Mount Tabor.
Yeah.
And Mount Tabor, then you have the hills of Moreh.
Yes,
in the middle, and then below that you have the Mount starts for G.
Gerizim.
Gerizim.
Yeah. So Gerizim. Okay. So yeah, over here, actually, Gerizim is further south. It's Gerizim, and it might be here, but I think it's further south from there. I'm not quite sure on this map. But when the children of Israel entered, it was just north of the Dead Sea, and so it was up here. And on Gerizim and
curse on one and
the blessings and the cursings. Yeah, and the altar of Joshua has been found on Mount Ebal or Ebal.
Have they ever found the stones that they took out of the river?
No, 12 stones taken out of the Jordan and set up for a memorial. I don't think those have been found. But the altar of Joshua has been found, and that's unfortunately it's in the West Bank. It's an area that's hard to get to, and I think you pretty much have to have a military guard in order to get to it. But that there has been archaeological excavation. Also here, let's see, by the Jezreel Valley, where it empties into the Syrian-African rift. Up in here is Bet Shean. So that's the place we talked about. But this is pretty, gives you a good mental image of what the terrain is like. Of course, you can't see the vegetation on this, but you see the ups and the downs and the bodies of water. Rich?
So with that rugged terrain, is there any knowledge as to what the pathway was that Joseph and Mary did from Nazareth down to Bethlehem?
Oh yeah, yeah. There was there were different routes, and from Nazareth, you could come right down through the valley of Jezreel. You could come through this pass and down, and then you could come up from, well, basically from Joppa. The route went up into the mountains. That would be the easiest route. Many Jews didn't like to take that route because it went right through Samaria. So as an alternate route from Galilee, they would come down here and come through this pass across the Jordan River to the east side, and they would come all the way down here and then cross over by Jericho and come up to Jerusalem. So in John chapter 4, it says that Jesus was down here in Judea, and he was going to go back up to his own territory. He said he must needs go through Samaria. Well, he didn't have to go through Samaria. He could have taken the normal route the Jews took to avoid, but he had to go through Samaria because he had a divine appointment to meet that woman at the well. And so he took the more straightforward route that went along the hills of Samaria, which you could do as well. So there were multiple possible routes that you could take to get from Nazareth down to Bethlehem.
Where's the well for that you met?
The woman at the well? Yeah, so that is at, today it's called Nablus. Nablus is it's an Arabic corruption of the word Neapolis. There's that word polis again that we were looking at earlier, polis, city. Neapolis means new city. So it was named that by the Greeks, but in biblical times it was Samaria. That's the well. So it's north of Jerusalem, up in this region, so right in the heart of Samaria, and not too far from the mountains we talked about, Mount Ebal and Gerizim. It's in the West Bank today. It's not actually. I've actually never visited that site. I would like to. I'd love to go up there and see. Every year at Passover, the Samaritans have a Passover sacrifice. They actually sacrifice the Passover lambs and roast them and have a celebration like the Bible describes the Passover. And it's a big annual event there at Samaria, Mount Gerizim.
Is that Jacob's well?
No. Oh yes, yeah, that would be Jacob's well. Yeah, that was Jacob's well. Yeah, Jacob has a well down at Beersheba too, but Jacob's well there. Yeah, the patriarchs dug lots of wells.
Certainly.
Yeah. So anyway, yeah, that's a map there. Rainfall in Israel. Here's another interesting map. So in this map, north is on the right-hand side. South is on the left-hand side. So again, you can see Gaza down here. Gaza is the south end of where you get much rainfall. But you can see it increases. We talked about those 4 quadrants. The heaviest rainfall up here in the northwest. Okay.
Are those inches of rain?
I think those are centimeters or millimeters. Yeah. Yeah.
So, okay, I'm sorry. Can you back up?
If we can.
Okay, so Damascus is
That's Syria.
in Syria. Okay, so okay.
Yep. So you've got from the Dead Sea, you go north up here. Here's the Sea of Galilee, and from here you go north up towards Mount Hermon. So everything on this map up from this river or west is Israel. On the east side, down below here, you have Jordan down here, and then Syria above that. Yeah. Okay, so Israel in Jesus's day. So you got the Mediterranean. This is oriented like we are more accustomed to, north at the top, south at the bottom. But you've got Jerusalem, of course. You got Nazareth. Here's Capernaum, right on the edge of the Sea of Galilee. Over on the other side, Bethsaida. Now it's interesting. Peter is said to have had a house in Capernaum, but Peter and Andrew are said to be to have come from Bethsaida. So did they have two homes, or did Peter marry a gal from Capernaum? This is where Peter's mother-in-law was healed of a fever. So what's called Peter's house in Capernaum may actually have been his mother-in-law's house. But Bethsaida, there's been a lot of recent work done trying to locate Bethsaida. Used to be thought it was at one site. Now they think it's at another site. So there's a lot of debate about that. But apparently the Sea of Galilee is at a lower elevation than it was in biblical times. So where they think Bethsaida is today, it's up quite a ways from the Sea of Galilee. It's hard to see it and think, oh, this could be a fishing village. But if the elevation of the surface of the Sea of Galilee was much higher, then it would make more sense. So I don't know, there's a lot of, here's Golan over on the side. We talked about the Golan Heights. So Gerasa, here's Sychar. That's the well we were just talking about. The woman at the well, that's at Sychar. So yeah, these kinds of maps, again, this also gives you an idea of the geography, the lay of the land. This is just the region right around Jerusalem. We're talking about Bethel during the break. Bethel is where, or Shiloh. Shiloh is nearby Bethel. Bethel is mentioned a number of times, right to the north. So here's Jerusalem. And this isn't big enough to see the Dead Sea, which would be off to the right of this map. Off to the left, you went further, you eventually end up at the Mediterranean. But this is the Brook of Kidron. So the Kidron flows out of the spring, the Kidron spring, into the Kidron Valley. So Hezekiah's tunnel starts where that spring is. So this brook is not filled with water all of the time, but it comes from this major water source. It flows into the Kidron Valley. Yeah.
So I see Gibeon and then Geba on that map.
Yeah.
What about Gibeah? Is that somewhere related to there?
Gibeah of Saul.
Yeah.
Gibeah of Saul. Let me think. I think it is Gibeon.
Okay.
Or it might be. I think it's Gibeon because it's an I letter in Hebrew. Here it's Gibeah. And sometimes these names get Latinized from their Hebrew form, and so you get the. In fact, one of the things that archaeologists face when they're trying to locate a place, oftentimes they'll find that it has an Arabic name, and if they try to make the switch from Arabic back into Hebrew by changing a consonant here or there that forms a normal kind of shift, consonantal sounds, they can come up with the ancient biblical name. So a lot of these very, very ancient towns held on to the same name, but they just changed slightly with the change of languages. That's what you have here. Here's the city of Ai. If you go down to the east, you get to Jericho. So the first two cities that were conquered when Joshua came into the land, first Jericho. Jericho was to be dedicated to God as a total destruction dedicated to God. And you might remember that Achan found some Babylonish garments and he took them for himself. And when the children of Israel then came next to Ai, most people say Ai, but it's a diphthong. Ai is the way it's pronounced. They were unable to take it. In fact, the inhabitants of Ai kind of slaughtered a bunch of the Jewish soldiers. And so there was a lot of weeping and sorrow. But God said, no, somebody has taken something out of
Sin in the camp.
Yeah.
what's that?
Sin in the camp.
Yeah, sin in the camp, exactly. And they had to discover who it was that had sinned. And by casting the lots, eventually it came down to Achan and his family. Once they were judged, they were able to take the city of Ai. Very interesting military maneuver, as God had them come from two different directions and lay a trap. But they got that. Bethel, the house of God. Beth means house. You have cities like Bethlehem, house of bread. Bethel, house of God. There are a number of cities that start with B-E-T-H. Now, it's actually pronounced Bet. Bet, not th, but Bet. Bet-El, Bethlehem.
What would Bethsaida mean?
Bethsaida, yeah, is the house of, let me think. I can't remember what Saida is, but you do have up on Mount of Olives, you have Bethany. Bet-Ani is the house of humility. There's also, well, we talked about Bet Shemesh. That's house of the sun. Shemesh means sun. But like I said, there are just a lot of these Bet names. Bethsaida. I know I've come across it before, and I just can't resurrect it in my mind.
Google it, yeah.
You stumped the professor. Yeah. So. Okay, we've already looked at maps like this, but here again is Jerusalem, just as a reminder. In white, you have today's old city walls that come from the medieval period. Here's the Temple Mount. So again, on this one, north is in the upper right-hand corner, south in the lower left-hand corner. It's not oriented the same way as we orient maps. In ancient times, it was actually more customary to put the east at the top of a map. And we even have the word orient, you orient a map. That comes from the word orient, which means the east. When we think of something as being oriental, it's referring to lands in the east. So that's the reason we orient a map that way, is because in ancient time, they would put the east at the top. This isn't quite that way, but this is oriented differently. I think it's to fit everything on here in a nice way. But the city of David, was Salem, Shalem, and it was Jebus, and then it was Jerusalem. And then, of course, it got renamed as Aelia Capitolina by Hadrian. Thank you. So between the city of David and the Temple Mount is this area called the Ophel. And there were a lot of houses that were built here. In Solomon's day, housing for the priests was in this area. So they had ready access to the Temple Mount. In later times, in New Testament times, there were very, very wealthy homes in this area. And there's an archaeological park in this area that we'll visit that takes you through some of those very, very expensive, wealthy homes dating back to New Testament times. And you can kind of see what lifestyle was like for the rich at that time. Temple Mount is just again, you have these retaining walls and a plaza. Underneath this plaza is an actual mountain with sloped sides. Okay, so in order to put a building on top of that mountain, they had to build a flat spot on top. So retaining walls, and Solomon built retaining walls. Now this side, the east side, was the same wall that Solomon built, but on the western side it was closer in this direction, and the southern side I think was smaller. The Solomon's Temple Mount was smaller. Herod the Great built additional walls to make the plaza much bigger. So we talk about the first and the second temple. First temple, Solomon's temple. Second temple standing at the time of Jesus. However, the second temple was first built by guys like Ezra and Zerubbabel in the Old Testament. And their temple was built on the same platform that Solomon had. So it was Herod that then undertook this great building project to expand and beautify the temple. Again, it's one of the things he tried to do to win over the Jews. And they loved the temple, but they didn't love the builder of the temple. So the temple here. And this wall on the western side here is what's known as the Western Wall, the Wailing Wall. After the temple was destroyed, all that remained here were these retaining walls on all four sides. But during the various periods in the Middle Ages, when the Crusaders were there, or various Arabs were there, Jews were not allowed to go to the site of the temple. They weren't allowed up here. The closest they could get was to this Western Wall. That's where the Arabs and the Crusaders would let them go. And so they went there because they couldn't go to the actual holy site. They wept. And it got the name Wailing Wall for that reason. That's right here. But you can see that all of this, the city of David, the Ophel, and the temple, all outside of the old city walls. Now the city walls did come to kind of encompass this, but the whole Old Testament Jerusalem lay outside of the old city walls. This valley right here is your Tyropoeon Valley, and that separates the city of David from this western hill. So you go to Israel today, and over here in this part of the old city, it's called Mount Zion. Biblical Mount Zion is this whole mountain range. Kidron Valley separates the city of David from the Mount of Olives. Mount of Olives right here. At the second coming, the Mount of Olives is going to be split in half with a valley created from east to west like this. Half of the mountain will move north, half of the mountain will move to the south. But today it's all one. There was a report just recently, it was all over the place on YouTube and various things. There's the descent of the Mount of Olives here. They found all what looked like pictures. They said, "Oh, this is a sign of the coming of the Messiah," but it was just poor maintenance in the road. Okay. Another picture is this city of David, Temple Mount. Over here is what they call now the Mount Zion. Here you get a good idea of the three valleys around Jerusalem. The Valley of Hinnom, or Geb Ben Hinnom as it's known, Kidron Valley, and then the third valley right up through the middle is the Tyropoeon Valley. There's not much to the Tyropoeon Valley today. When you go here, it's all filled in. But in biblical times, it formed like three fingers. Finger one, finger two, and your thumb, like that. Okay? That's the way you can remember the geography of Jerusalem. Okay?
When you look at it from above, it looks like the name of God, right?
Well, so this looks like the Hebrew letter Shin, which is in the name Shaddai, El Shaddai. So that's the connection there. Yeah.
That's the one that almost looks like a capital N.
It looks like a W.
Oh, okay, that's what.
Yeah, it looks like a W.
Okay.
So some people say when I write my name on, is it that scripture says I will write my name on Jerusalem and that.
Oh yeah.
That letter.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
If you look at it, it looks like God's written his name in the mountains.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Yeah. You can make it look like that. Okay. Here's a nice view of the Valley of Jezreel from Mount Carmel. So Muhraka is a site up on Mount Carmel where this contest between Elijah and the prophet of Baal currently took place. And from that place, there's a monastery there, and you can go up on the roof of this monastery and have this panoramic view. It's a wonderful place. This is what you can see. Now, this particular picture is pretty good. It's a little hazy off in the distance. Now, what you find in Israel is at times when the winds pick up sand from the desert down in Saudi Arabia and Egypt, will bring that sand up into the land of Israel and make the sky very hazy like this. So that's not smog. It's it's sand in the air. On a real nice clear day from this position, you could see way across the Jordan River. You could look to the north and see Mount Hermon with snow on it. You could look to the south in the direction of Tel Aviv and see quite a long ways. But this is the valley down here that used to be swampland. You can see all this farming down there. There's also down in the valley, right. If I can see it on here, but there is a prison, and in the base of that, out in the prison yard, actually was discovered one of the earliest Christian churches ever found. And there is there was a table actually that was dedicated to Jesus Christ as God in that at that site, and that was just discovered maybe 20 years ago. A very recent discovery. So I think that prison has now been shut down. But I mean, they continued operating it for many years after this discovery. But I think they want to make it open and available for people to visit. So they're relocating the prison. There's also an air base. Israeli Air Force has an air base there with underground hangars for their fighter jets. And they come in and land and then go underground.
Is this the valley that Amir Sephardi lives in?
I think Amir Sephardi lives up by not too far from the Sea of Galilee, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. So it would be he's probably a little north of here and east of here, or by the Sea of Galilee.
Talks about them here in the plains.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Come right over his house, rattle his house.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. No, that happens just about anywhere in Israel. But it's such a tiny country, that when they fly over everybody. That's the Kishon River. There. What else we got? Hill of Priests, where the priests of Baal were put to death after the contest with Elijah. This is Mount Tabor. You can't really see it, but it's right over here.
This is a pretty cool map.
Yeah. The height of Moreh. Okay, nice map. Yeah, Armageddon. So you see kind of the centrality of Armageddon from this map. I might have shown this in an earlier class, but you notice here we've got the Mediterranean, and now that we've been through this will make more sense. This way down here, see where it says Via Maris? That was this major trade route that ran up this way. Here's Megiddo, the valley of Jezreel. So you think about this Via Maris, this major trade route coming from the east. Here's Ur of the Chaldeans, where Abraham came from. This today is in Iraq. So we have Ur. Abraham travels up here to Haran, and from Haran he comes down into Israel and then goes down into Egypt. So this is the route that Abraham would have followed as he comes into the promised land and goes down into Egypt, and then he'll come back. And this part of it was just a kind of a detour to get up here to Haran. The trade route it actually went like this. From Egypt, it connects this way if you're coming up from Egypt. From Sinai, you come up this way, and from Turkey, you come down this way. Where all these routes meet that's Megiddo. That's the Valley of Armageddon. That's the Jezreel Valley, and that's where this last great prophetic battle, according to the Book of Revelation, is going to at least begin. The whole battle isn't fought there. What Revelation says is the armies of the world gather together at this Valley of Armageddon for this last great battle. And from there, they actually travel around to various places. They go down this way to Petra. They're going to come back up and come to Jerusalem, and up at Mount of Olives. Okay, so that's a good question. It gives the distance. It gives both the height and the distance. The distance is roughly the distance from Megiddo to the Red Sea at Elah.
Whoa.
It could be the distance from a round trip from Jerusalem to Elah and back, or from Megiddo to somewhere and back. But there are different theories about that. Now, the height, it says it reaches up to the horses' bridles. Probably not a depth of blood solid like that, but there'll be so much blood it'll be splashing up onto the horses' bridles. That's the idea there.
Thank goodness.
Yeah. Well, there'll be plenty of blood in that battle too, and the vultures are given an invitation to come and feast. But there it is. That's Armageddon. From Nazareth, looking across the Valley of Armageddon, you have this view. So Luke 4, Jesus enters the synagogue in Nazareth. He opens the scroll to read from Isaiah 61. He reads halfway through the verse and he stops. And he rolls up the scroll and hands it back to the president of the synagogue. The eyes of everybody fixed upon him. They want to know, why did you stop reading? And he says, today, this is fulfilled. Well, he stopped before it talked about the second coming. He talked about coming and the healings, sight to the blind, and all this sort of thing that had to do with the first coming. You have a prophetic prediction of the of both the first and the second coming of Christ joined together in that passage. And Jesus knew exactly what was going to happen, of course. They stopped there. Then they took him out from there, and it says, there was given to him the book of the prophet Isaiah, and then later they led him to the brow of the hill on which their city was built. So this is the traditional site that's called the brow of Nazareth, where they say that he was cast down. From that site, you can look right across the Jezreel Valley. You can see all through it. So we just a couple of slides ago looked at the Jezreel Valley from Mount Carmel on the other side. Here's looking at it from the east side.
Is that Gilboa then, the big mountain on top there?
Is that hill what?
Gilboa.
Okay, so I think that is Gilboa. It looks like Gilboa, and you know, Gilboa is where Saul and his sons were killed. And in the song of lament that David sang, he talks about about Mount Gilboa being barren for the rest of time. And I talked about the trees that Israel has planted lots of trees, but they never plant trees on Mount Gilboa in the commemoration of that lament of David. And it's a barren hillside. Oh, I'm sorry, that's Moreh. Yeah.
City of Nineveh, is that in Iran?
So yeah, Nineveh is in actually Iraq.
Iraq.
Yeah, in northern Iraq. And I'm trying to remember the name of it. It has a modern day name. During the Iran-Iraq, during the our invasion of Iraq, there was the city was in the news. Mosul. Mosul is the name of the city. You might remember hearing about Mosul during that war. That's Nineveh.
Okay.
And I actually, years ago, I was teaching a Sunday school class back when North Valley Baptist Church was still North Valley Baptist Church, an adult Sunday school class. And we had a lady in that class that was from Mosul. And she was an Iraqi Christian. She was, she spoke, her mother tongue was Aramaic.
Oh.
Yeah. And they still speak Aramaic there. And she says, yeah, I'm from Nineveh. And they have, every year, they have a great feast there to commemorate the preaching of Jonah in Nineveh. But you remember when the movie came out, The Passion of the Christ? And it was all in Aramaic. So she went to see that movie about a dozen times because it was in her language.
It felt so good.
Yeah.
So where would Iran be from Nineveh?
So Iran is further to the east. So you go, if you're going from Israel, going eastward, you go Israel, then Jordan, then Iraq, and then Iran. Okay. So I should have gone the other direction from here.
So that would be Babylon.
We're up there.
Present day Iraq is Babylon.
Yeah, Iraq is Babylon. Southern Iraq is Babylon. Northern Iraq is Nineveh. In the biblical times, Nineveh was the capital of Assyria. So oftentimes people get confused between Assyria and Syria. So they're not the same. So the capital of Syria is Damascus. The capital of Assyria in Old Testament times was Nineveh.
That's a ways away.
Yeah, that's a long ways away.
I know, I didn't realize Babylon was even that far from there.
Yeah, it's a long ways away.
Went all the way over there to conquer them?
Yeah. So that's okay. There's Sea of Galilee, all the places around the Sea of Galilee. So you asked about Bethsaida. So here's Bethsaida. I'm sorry?
It's the house of fishing or hunting is what the name is.
Okay. Yeah, fishing or hunting. So it's the house of fishing, no doubt.
Yeah. Yeah.
So here is showing two possible locations for Bethsaida. Yeah. Well, on this map, yes. But it's when you get there, it's up a ways from quite a ways from the coastline. So Capernaum is here. Tabgha. Tabgha means 7 springs. Here's Gennesaret. That's where the Jesus boat is. We're losing our thing again, aren't we? Magdala. Did I talk about Magdala? Mary Magdalene. Mary Magdalene is Mary from Magdala. Was that tonight we were talking about that? No, I was talking to somebody else earlier today about that. Yeah. The word in Hebrew, the word migdol means a tower. Right behind the city of Magdala is it's the mountain Mount you know, where I like to go.
Oh, Arbel.
Arbel, thank you. Mount Arbel. And so from the Sea of Galilee, just in a little ways, you get this cliff that shoots straight up. And then on the backside, it slopes down. So from this site, it looks like this gigantic tower going in. So from the Hebrew word migdal comes Magdalene. Magdalene. So Mary Magdalene is Mary from Migdala, which is the city by this tower. So, but yeah, up here on Mount Arbel, you can imagine if you're up on top of this real high mountain that's right here, you can look north, east, south, and have this wonderful, wonderful panoramic view of the whole Sea of Galilee. So the hotel where we'll be staying is in Tiberias, right here. And
There we go.
yeah, did it come back?
Yeah.
Then it went off again.
No, that's it. Galilee.
Okay, so from Tiberias, we'll be able to get on a boat, take a little sail out on the Sea of Galilee. I think the projector's telling me it's time to quit.
Where are we staying in Jerusalem?
Yeah, in Jerusalem,
Ambassador.
if you go, it's the Ambassador Hotel. If you go out the Damascus Gate and go straight north, it's a walk. It's a little bit of a walk. What does it take? About 20 minutes? 15 to 20 minute walk. Yeah. So,
Dr. Gunn?
yes.
You know, one of the things that just looking at all the diggings and stuff that has been done all over Israel reveals to me is that there is no real groupings of people earlier than what the Bible says. I mean, if there was really people that had been on our planet 20,000 years ago, 30,000 years ago, there would have been just as much places to go find all this stuff. And there isn't anything like that. It's just the timeline of our Bible, and it's perfectly accurate.
Yeah, that's a really good point, David. Now you will find, and I think I mentioned this when we were talking about Mount Carmel one evening. There are caves on Mount Carmel that have remains of what they call Neanderthals, and some of them will date those back earlier than the flood. But all those dating schemes are based on certain assumptions. And a lot of the datings of things that come from archaeology are subject to interpretation. But with very, very few exceptions, you're absolutely right, David, that everything is from within the time frame of what we have exactly in the Bible. And then there's some questionable things that really are honestly very difficult to date. Yeah, so that's a point well taken, David. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, anybody else with a comment before we quit for the night? Yeah.
In Bethlehem, do we see the area where the shepherds had their flocks?
Yeah, so the shepherd's fields are there in Bethlehem, and we usually go to the shepherd's fields. I'm sure we probably will. So we'll see that. We'll see the church of the Nativity there, and the site where Jesus was reputedly born. Yeah, and also below the church, there is a grotto called Jerome, the Grotto of Jerome. Now, Jerome was the translator of the Latin Vulgate. So the Latin Vulgate is important because when people were no longer speaking Greek, but started speaking Latin, Jerome said, I want the people to have the Bible in their own language. So what later became a means for the Catholic Church to keep people from understanding the Bible, the Latin Vulgate, originally was an effort to give the people the Bible in their own language. That was Jerome. And you can see the place where Jerome finished his translation. And that was actually in the same place where the Church of the Nativity is. Yeah. I don't know if we'll go down there. We have at times gone there. I always like to go down there, especially to bring some of our Bible college students, because it's the Bible college, and anything Bible related is precious and important to us. Yeah. Okay, well, folks, thank you for coming tonight. Now, next week we'll kind of wrap some things up. We'll talk about a little bit more about the trip itself, what to expect in terms of itinerary, traveling, maybe some tips about the planes and flights and passports, visas, and practical stuff like that. If you have any questions about what to pack, what to bring, things like that, we can discuss that next week too. Okay?
Is that our last session? Or
That'll be our last session. We could have another one, but we're not going to push it. Yeah, next week will be our last session. So it's getting close.
Be going near Bethany when we do Bethlehem? Or
Yeah, Bethany is actually closer to Jerusalem. So Bethany is on the top of the Mount of Olives. We'll be very close to Bethany. There's not a lot to see there. I mean, there's you can drive down the street and the tour guide will say, "There's where Bethany was."
Yeah.
And you see a bunch of buildings.
Yeah.
Stuff.
Okay.
But yeah, that's right up on Mount of Olives.
Okay.
There's a church there. There's churches everywhere.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
There wasn't a church there much Jesus.
No, there was not.
Okay.